We're live on PM Express, and tonight a big release from the Ghana Integrity Initiative, the Transparency International, the all-important, all-powerful, almighty Corruption Perception Index. And the fundamental question we are asking tonight, based on the statistics and the figures that we are seeing from that, is are we winning the fight? The fight against corruption has been going on for a while, and many people will tell you that the 2016 elections was decided fundamentally on the question of corruption. And so, what does this year's score say about how we're performing? It says that we've scored 41 out of a score of 100. Is that really good? If you are sitting in class and exam is done at the end of the term and you score 41, that's a fail, or just slightly above that. But if you put this in context, though, it tells a different story because it is an improvement. 1 point. If you put it in context. What context? Context of how we performed over the years, particularly since 2015. It's 1 point above where we were in 2017. Just 1 point. We have a whole year, we improved 1 point. It's an improvement nonetheless, and we'll talk about that. And we ranked 78 out of 180 countries. I mean, that is positive. 180 countries, we're 78. That says a lot. Now, the GI says the score is a positive departure from the continuous drop since 2015. Now, it's positive, and I told you that, 2015, because we're seeing that since 2015 we've been dropping consistently. We are at the point where we couldn't go any lower, and that's why we've inched up. But there are fundamental reasons why this is the case. The CPI used and how they get there. The CPI used 19 data sources of independent institutions to come to this conclusion. Around 180 countries and territories by their perceived levels of public sector corruption. More than 2/3 of the countries score below 50 on this year's CPI, with an average score of just about 43. And the fundamental question, if you look at everything that we've said, are we winning the war against corruption? Is this something that we should be jubilating? But fundamentally, so we scored 41. And so what? What does this really mean in real terms for the way people perceive us, for our ability to attract foreign direct investment? Does this have any real live implications beyond the figures? That's the discussion we are having tonight. It will maybe affect your life. We don't know. We'll be exploring that with those who know. Stay with us here on PM Express. My guest in the studio tonight, Linda Ofori-Kwafo, is Executive Director of the Ghana Integrity Initiative. And also in the studio with me is Senanu, who is a co-chair of the Citizen Movement Against Corruption. We'll be joined shortly by Information Minister Kojo Opon-Krumah via Skype as we have this conversation. Remember that you could always join us with your own thoughts on this very important subject. I want to start with you, Linda Ofori-Kwafo, since this is something that falls on your lap. So break it down for us. 41%, correct? The score we got. Is it 41, right?
41 out of
100.
Yes.
What does it mean?
It means that you are scoring countries whose scores have been standardized by Transparency International on a scale that says 0 is very corrupt and 100 is very clean. And then Ghana gets 41. Denmark gets 88. New Zealand gets 87. Seychelles and the others perform better than Ghana. Ghana has gotten 41, obviously below even the global average of 43. So it means that Ghana, that's the score we had, and we are not above the half mark of 50, and we have always never been above the half mark of 50.
We've never been?
No.
Since we started the CPI?
Yes, the highest has been 48 in the year 2014.
Okay.
Yes, so then if in the past we have been declining, and that's how come we use the word positive departure from the decline that we've been experiencing since the year 2015. It's very, very significant, and it's not, we are not saying that Ghana has done so well or we have made some significant improvements statistically, but then obviously we have at least stopped from declining for this year, and we are hoping we will not decline but rather rise and then go beyond the 50 pass mark, not pass mark, but about 50.
Okay.
Yes.
So in real terms, does it mean, so what I'm trying to drive at is, in real terms, in terms of corruption and what it means for, is Ghana more corrupt now or less corrupt now? I mean, at one point.
Means by one point, it's a change. And it means Ghana is less corrupt than, I want us to put this discussion in proper context. When you talk about the corruption perception index, we are looking at public sector corruption only, and looking at two main indicators, political corruption and administrative corruption. Nothing more, nothing less. The CPI actually does not take into consideration a number of issues. For instance, citizens' perception of corruption. It is an assessment by business executives and country experts, they call them.
Business executives?
Yes, people who do business in these countries.
Okay, but these are private individuals?
Yes, they are individuals. They can be organizations, they can be individuals.
Okay, so how are they able to assess public sector corruption? Because
they engage the public sector. If I'm a businessman based in another country and I want to do business in Ghana, I come to Ghana to do business. I have to go
in other words,
process
you're dealing with the Registrar General's department,
yes.
You're dealing with the ports, for example, yes. etc.
So
and that's how you then rate their performance.
Yes, but then it's also a composite index. So we have about 13 surveys, and I want to correct that, not 19. 13 surveys were used for the CPI, and 9 of these surveys covered Ghana. Okay. So you should get at least 3 surveys covering your country before you can be included. And then TI does, because the surveys are rating the countries with different scores and rates, so 1 to 7, 1 to 100, they have to standardize to get a scale that will be good for all of them. So then TI then strikes an average and then scores countries accordingly. So then if we are looking at public sector corruption, we are not looking at issues like tax avoidance or tax fraud. We're not looking at money laundering. We're not looking at citizens' perception and experience of corruption. So a country like Denmark might be having its own challenges when it comes to money laundering and tax fraud and all those things, but will be performing very well on the CPI because the issues of public sector bribery will not be so prevalent in a country like Denmark. So those countries that did very well and they are always in the top 20s and the top 10s might be having very minimal ordinary day bribery and the things that happen in the country like ours. So that's how come they are scoring better. Not because on the whole they are not corrupt. They might be corrupt in certain aspects, but the CPI scope and focus does not cover the area that they might be engaging in so much corruption.
And I noticed from the statement that was released today, there's a lot of, you try to explain why we saw this improvement. And there are, and this comes to how the citizens can hold this as a tangible outcome of an assessment of a corruption, because you talk about the audit service, you talk about and how it's performing. You also talk about the ports, and a lot of people deal with the ports, paperless, etc. These are very specific things that makes the CPI tangible. Expand on that for me.
Okay, so then we did that because it's composite index. We have 9 surveys covering Ghana. If we go into the details, you realize that under some of the surveys, Ghana improved its performance from last year. So the World Bank CPIA, I've gotten the full meaning, and then World Economic Forum, Ghana performed well. And the one we call the Varieties for Democracy, called VDEM, Ghana did not perform, Ghana dropped. But I realized that the drop that we had under the VDEM is not equal to the one that we had. The increase was more than the drop under the other 2 surveys that I mentioned. Those 2 surveys then covered some areas. They look at issues concerning import and exports. They look at issues concerning...
So import and export, does it mean corruption, delays, people's demands of bribery?
They ask
what specifically?
The business executives and country experts to assess a country based on how imports and exports. So
these are real human beings?
No.
Who are doing import and export? And sort of scoring Ghana on their experience of the ports? They're not only scoring
Ghana, they are scoring so many countries. Including Ghana.
So they are comparing Ghana to others?
So a particular survey might cover about only 7 countries. But there will be others. So you don't have the same surveys being used for all the countries. So under the World Bank survey, for instance, a number of countries or individuals might be scoring many countries, including Ghana.
Based on the experience of, say, the port?
Yep.
Okay.
So they ask questions about public sector institutions, how accountable are they? How is the audit work being done? And the most important that really actually excited me was about public accountability. How well are citizens able to hold the executive to account?
How do we do that?
Oh, we do that so every day, every now in this country. We ask questions.
In terms of the way we were scored on that level, did you do well in the...
It still falls under the World Bank survey where we improved.
Which we improved, okay.
Yes,
so in other words, people believe that in Ghana we hold our leaders accountable. Okay.
So these are the areas that it's covered. Then when it comes to, I think the World Economic Forum also, they're talking about judicial reforms, for instance, access to government information. We might not have an RTI law, but you and I know that we have ways and means we've been getting the information.
We've got the leaks all the time. I love the leaks.
Yes, it does not mean that we don't need the law. We really need the RTI law. And so these are, so even if without the RTI law...
So we scored good too in terms of public information?
Public, how the civil society assess public information.
So we scored better there?
It's under that particular heading.
Okay. We did well there?
Yeah, we did. We improved a bit.
Now I see why you rush to say, but we still need the RTI. I mean, of course, if the international community believe you're doing well, then why the status quo is good?
Please don't go there. The discussion for another day.
We need to talk about that because it's important. Because the politicians will hang on to your word and say, look, not a few of them who don't like the bill. So they'll go to Parliament, Mr. Speaker, this is the evidence to show you that we don't need a law.
No, we need the RTI law. Please, we are actually looking at a survey that might have asked the question in relation to how citizens, how civil society are able to access public information.
Okay.
Does not mean that we don't need an RTI law to make it easier for us. So in those areas, we performed well. But in other areas, obviously, we did not. Okay. And so that might have caused our inability to even go beyond the 1 point. But we are not so, I think I want to put this on record. The departure is what we are talking about. Ghana at least has been able, this time not to drop. And this time not to sustain. I think Nigeria actually kept the same mark, but we were able to move a step further and to be at par with countries like Burkina Faso and the rest that were passing us in the last survey.
Mr. Senanu, so what? Should we be jubilating because we improved 1 by 1 point?
No, we can't jubilate. There's no cause for jubilation here. I think it calls for some more reflection. What are the things that we've done in the last 2-3 years? As you know, you don't get a reflection of what a country is doing within the same year. It probably took 3 years. So what are the things we've done between 2015 to 2018? Yes, the 2 years, 2016, 2018, to make sure we stem the tide of further, decline. And what are the kind of things other countries have done to accelerate their improvement on the score? Because if we begin to look at that, we probably will find that there are things there are low-hanging fruits that we could immediately take on board and say, look, let's make sure funding for the NACAP is a done deal.
We've been talking about this for ages.
Say that again. There are a few things that could be done to probably propel us, catapult us up that scale, and that would be very good for us, especially considering the fact that this government came into power on the back of an anti-corruption drive, and we don't seem to have seen enough of that.
And that is so important. We need to emphasize that.
Absolutely.
I mean, almost all our elections, 2012 and 2016 particularly, were decided on that question of corruption.
Absolutely.
And that is why the CPI is important. And we'll be speaking to Ms. Oponkroma shortly. They watch this, and you trepidate depending on how good you fare on
Absolutely.
the CPI.
And I think that, I mean, let's say to their credit, we haven't gone further down. Otherwise, that would have been just catastrophic, because having this discussion, knowing the kind of confidence we reposed in this government, saying that, look, we want to see that change. And especially when we had Martin appointed at the SPO, a lot of us were very elated. But we haven't seen the results. So it's important that much further analysis of what has transpired over the last 2 years, how other countries have managed to make gains. We need to take all of that on board and see what do we do moving forward.
My fundamental question, the same question to both, is the 41 score, and so what? In other words, why should we bother that we score 41? How does that have real-life implications for this country, its ability, its economy, etc., etc.? Apart from, isn't it just a little number on a piece of paper written by some organization somewhere in the world? How do you explain that?
I don't know. It's not just a number.
Okay.
I mean, in any given institution or nation, when you look at the context of monitoring and evaluation, there's always value to be placed to the extent that somebody is examining what is going on and is able to tell you that something has changed or nothing has changed. If you don't have a sense of whether there's any progress or not, and are not able to do the kind of analysis that say, okay, we can see that this is now stable, we've been able to put this in place, we need these other things in place, then really there's no sense of direction and there is no source of information to guide what you can do better. I think the CPI gives us some opportunity to tackle corruption in some sectors, not everywhere, not in all areas of the kind of scope we would like to look at, but it provides an avenue where we can intelligently say that as far as business is concerned. And by the way, the key driver of any nation is the economy. And so if you're looking at those aspects of corruption that affect the business people and what people globally we're looking at to decide whether I'm bringing my money to Ghana or not, you're doing a very good thing in terms of deciding what can we do better to attract more investment. So I think it's a very valuable index that gives us a sense of what we're doing right and wrong, and at least has an informed basis that you can look into and say, these are the areas that Ghana needs to be working on.
Linda, what are the real life consequences for such poor performances on the CPI? What does it do to us?
Okay, so then you actually even said earlier on that if you look at the past elections that we had, it's always an indicator.
Yeah.
People actually vote parties out according to people. We voted this one out because we are more corrupt than the one we are expecting to come in.
But people don't think about the CPI when they're voting.
Oh, you might think they don't know or they don't hear. They know what is happening. People know something is called CPI. And CPI is the global, the only, to be frank, global indicator or index that business people look at when they are coming, because there is none.
When you're coming. So what you're saying is that the investors that the president, we are spending millions traveling across the world to woo and come and invest, they pick the CPI and use that to make a decision whether to come here or not.
Yes, they do.
That's how serious this is.
It is very important. It's a very important index that we cannot actually take for granted. I have people and friends who called me 2 days before the release and were asking me the score because they are meeting some business people and want to use the CPI. I said, no, it's ever good. And no matter if you are my husband, I won't tell you.
I see.
So then people are really interested in the CPI because it's the only so far global index that can actually look at.
International businesses and investors are using CPI to make investment decisions.
Yes, because we are talking about bribery in the public sector.
Okay.
Who would want to come to Ghana or Nigeria or any country and spend so much money bribing public officials before they'll be able to get the contract they are looking for?
Yeah.
It's cost to them. So they actually have to take a decision based on how corrupt a country is perceived to be, and especially a country's public sector.
Interesting. No wonder on the list of sub-Saharan African countries doing great, you find countries like Rwanda that has scored, what, 56%, something we've never dreamt come close to. No wonder they have the BMWs running there to set up factories, etc., to produce vehicles. Possibly a spin-off, a benefit from this consistent performance on the African continent.
Apart from Rwanda, when you look at the countries that perform well on the CPI, countries in the Scandinavian countries and all those ones, the tax fraud and all those things notwithstanding, people still go there to do business. The economies are doing well. It's because people believe that the CPI is a very great indicator when it comes to making a business decision. And so how well you are performing, I'm sure if Ghana should be scoring around 60, just like the Seychelles and the Botswana.
66.
Yes, I'm sure
28 out of 180 countries. That is fantastic. That's just a tiny little island country.
And we normally do not place so much emphasis on the rank because, for instance, when we add more countries to the CPI, the ranks are likely to change.
Okay.
And a country like Denmark, I keep on citing them because they did not do anything. Nothing changed.
Yeah.
They had their same score, just as somebody dropped. And so they were able to take the first position.
Yeah.
So the CPI still remains a very important indicator that you cannot put aside when people are making business decisions as to whether to go and invest in the country or not.
Senanu, do our politicians understand this?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I probably over time our civil society continues to, you know, churn out these reports and media works with us to talk about these issues. They'll begin to understand the fact that other people are making key decisions based on reports like this. But I don't think so, because you hardly get the politicians talking about CPI and talking about what they're going to do. I mean, fundamentally, to look at what the basis of the CPI is and what we're going to do to deal with this. We would like to see a lot more of that. I don't think that the politicians understand how much of an important tool the CPI is in order to drive an economy, and as a tool also to attract investments, which is key for all of us.
Yeah. But they understand something.
What do they understand?
They understand the score. And they are always looking for the score. I
the
remember,
politicians?
Yep. One of the lunches some years back, I think there was an improvement by some point. The days that we used to do it in points.
Yes.
And then I remember a former government official who was in when they heard, they said, yes, we made it. They understand the score.
In terms of scoring points.
Scoring points.
Scoring political points.
Scoring political points. Yeah. Now, to that very point, because let's closely examine our performance in 2018 within the bigger context of how we've been performing over the years. And you rightly make the point in the press statement that it's an improvement because it sort of, you know, does well compared to 2015 now. But really, if you look at it, 2017, 2018, and I'm isolating the performance under this government, they've been the two worst years since the scores became comparable in our history. The two worst years, 2017, 2018, 40, 41. Since 2012, we've never had that low. That says a lot.
You are actually driving me to a conversation that happened last year that I didn't want to have again. But then now that you mentioned,
but the facts are there.
Okay, so
we need to talk. Let's talk about
It's a composite index.
Okay.
And so the number of index that we use in the surveys that are used must cover at most 2 years.
Okay.
So last year, if you remember, we have actually placed the years, the survey, and the years in which they were published, where the data was collected and ordered.
Yeah.
And we actually had so much bashing from a lot of people. Reason being that it would then move, the first year would not fall under the current administration's
So 2017's results is what you're referring to?
We'll be looking at 2016,
okay.
2017.
Okay.
Some of the surveys will cover 2016, were done in 2016, others were done in 2017. So we always say, when it comes to CPI, look at Ghana as a country, and not Ghana as party A leading, even though their work will obviously impact on the result that we are getting. So this year's own, obviously 2017, 2018 data sources were used in compiling the CPI.
I hear you.
So
but Mr. Senanu, I doubt if I fall for what she's selling. Seriously. Because...
So for this year's own, it's purely
this government.
17, 18.
Exactly. So they must own it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they must own it for Ghana.
I get the Ghana bit. But if we... I think my question to you, Mr. Senanu, is okay. We need accountability.
Yep.
To improve, we need to hold somebody and say, look, we need to do something about this. If we do not begin to call out governments and politicians, we can hold anybody responsible.
Evans, please, before Senanu comes in, even 2017, MPP government will still have to own it because they had administration in power at the time the CPI results were released. Okay. So, but then if you are doing this...
I get you. In fact, there's a very good addition to what you just said. I'll come, that's that question, just hold that thought for me. Okay. Because I want to take a quick break. When we return, I'll get Senanu to respond to that and more on that conversation as well. Because, as she said, when they score, I remember in 2014, when we had our highest score, it was a big deal. I mean, the politicians, the then government made a big deal of it, how they've done so well in fighting corruption. They put it on their CVs. It was part of the campaigns that they were running, because that was a historical performance in terms of an all-time high. And so when it dips, you need to still hold them accountable as well. And when we return, we'll talk about that. And then we'll also examine some of the specifics as the score itself has highlighted. Thankfully, we'll be joined by Kojo Upon Nkrumah. How is government looking at the CPI in terms of what they're learning from it? Most importantly, how to fix the challenges as has been identified so eloquently in the report. Stay with us here on PM Express. You're live on PM Express, having a very important conversation, and my appreciation, I hope your appreciation as well, of what the CPI means, hopefully has improved. Mine has significantly improved. International investors are using the CPI to make investment decisions. And remember, this is a country and a government that thrives on attracting businesses to invest. Just yesterday or 2 days ago, Renault, a very important global car manufacturer, where at the Jubilee House, he had met the president and they were committing to set up a plant here. We know other businesses are also indicating their willingness to do same. Stuff like the CPI is important in that decision-making process for these global giants. And that's why this is important. It affects your life. More investments you attract, foreign direct investment particularly, the more funds and revenue we can raise to improve our lives collectively. That's why CPI is absolutely important. And we are delighted that we are joined on the telephone on Skype actually by Kojo Upon Nkrumah, who is Information Minister, joining us via Skype. In the studio already is Linda Ofori-Kwafo, Executive Director of the Ghana Integrity Initiative, and Adam Senanu is the co-chair of the Committee of Citizen Movement Against Corruption. Mr. Upon Nkrumah, I'm grateful that you join us here on PM Express. What's your reaction to today's press statement from the CPI, which puts us at 41 out of 10, out of 100?
Good evening. Good evening to Linda and to the President Minister. I think consistently the government has said that we consider all of these surveys and these statistics that come out as feedback. Consider them as feedback in the governance agenda because it tells us what people think of where we are. And in particular, as Linda educated us earlier, this is what the business community, investors, key stakeholders think of where we are in this fight against corruption. And again, I agree with Linda when she says that, or when the statement says that this is a positive departure from a continuous work, albeit marginal improvement, especially when you measure in 2018. And I think specifically it makes mention of some of the measures that improve accountability of government, measures aimed at ensuring that literally protected. It also goes forward to talk about what we need to do to perhaps maintain or improve on this year's ranking. So for us, all in all, it's feedback. We as an administration started off our campaign when in opposition by carefully making the point that we want to fight corruption. And we've been doing a number of things we believe are aimed and are helping us to reduce the corruption threshold in this country, if not eliminate it. This serves as feedback, and we hope to do more in the months and years ahead.
Yeah, and Mr. Upon Nkrumah, if you look at the analysis that CPI itself did, 2015 to date, this is the first time that we've seen one little uptake in terms of our performance. Instead of, in other words, this is the first time we've begun an upward trajectory with the one point increase in our score. Is that a result of any deliberate government intervention?
When I read the report, my understanding is, among other things, it talks about certain things that government has been doing. As I mentioned earlier, literally putting the public has improved public accountability. And we as a government have been doing some of the things we've been doing, for example, at the digitization process, like e-procurement, the paperless system and reports, for example, e-passports. These are things that go to reduce the amount of human intervention that you have in some of these processes, which leads to a lot of corruption. When you're speaking to business people and you're asking them, what is the climate like when you're trying to do business? That's about clearing goods or getting things at the last department or everywhere. Then it gives us the feedback that some of these things are most likely responsible for the kind of impression that the investor community or the business community have, which translates into these kind of ratings that you're talking about. When you talk about public accountability, yes, it's one thing the media and the public asking for information on various matters or seeking to get information from government. But it's also another thing, A, government making that information available, and B, government even going further to strengthen and set up institutions that hold government accountable. The Office of the Special Prosecutor is an example, for example. The Auditor General's independence and the kind of work that he has been doing goes to the credit of the country because, it adds to our credentials as a country that seeks to hold government and public officials accountable. So you put all of these things together, and we have the view that these are things that come together to give us this kind of scope. Now, if you look at the commentary that the report runs on what is done moving on into the years, it talks about, for example, strengthening civil society groups and organizations that hold government accountable, and we are more than excited as an administration to invest a lot more in strengthening some of these institutions, so that in the end, not only do we score well on these indicators per se, but in substance, the space for the ordinary businessman and the ordinary Ghanaian to work without feeling like somebody seeking rent from him or her is reduced.
Mr. Ponkma, my quick question, and I'll bring in Senanu, I know who has something to say about government's own responsibility in dealing and improving the scores. If you look at the 2017, 2018, I say 2017, 2018 because obviously it's the time under your watch. The last 2 years of this administration has seen from the scores, if you are tracking from 2012, has seen the worst 2 scores since the CPI scores became comparable. I mean, no other government since 2012, for example, has experienced such low scores, despite the marginal improvement we've seen in the latest score that we're talking about in this latest report. Now, considering that yours is a party that rode into power largely on account of the NDC's perceived, corrupt status, this is, some may suggest, a pretty bad verdict on your corruption record, would you say?
I won't share that view because I'm not sure that the report you have in front of you is measuring the perception of corruption of the administration or the political act. Talking about the entire body policy of the system that we run here as a country. And my colleagues in the studio will be the first to tell you that culture is not built, culture is not built in a day, and the perception that people have of the culture is therefore not formed in a day. What you are seeing today are the fruits of our way of life over a period, which as an administration we are working to turn around. And that is why we are saying that if you've seen a dip over the year, you're beginning to see the curve tick up, even if marginally, by 1 point. It, for us, represents a beginning of a turnaround in the scheme of things. And mind you are talking about the fact that this is the first report that talks of 2017, 2018, which really measures our administration. I'm saying our administration because you are raising that dynamic. I was following the part of the discussion that talks about the fact that the government of Ghana must own this. Yes, we own this. But when you raise the question of the administration, then this is the first one that represents 2017, 2018, and is the one that you are beginning to get at. We're of the view that as we continue to invest in doing more of the things we talked about, cutting down sole sourcing, doing e-procurement, strengthening the institutions that hold, the keepers of the public purse accountable, we will see a certain resurgence of government performance, not only on this indicator, which, as I mentioned earlier, is for us feedback, but in substance. The person who does business in Ghana or the investor who wants to do business in Ghana will also experience less intrusion in their desire to do business in Ghana.
I want to quickly hold the line for me briefly, Mr. Ponkruma. I want to quickly bring Mr. Senanu on that last point, because that's a question I was asking before Mr. Ponkruma joined us. So what's your own assessment of this government's role in, I guess, fixing the challenges as I've identified? And as I rightly pointed out, if you look at since 2012, since this became comparable, the scores, the last 2 years have been the lowest we've had in that period.
First of all, I think it's important to commend the efforts government has made so far. It would have been absolutely disastrous if we had been at the same place or gone down again, especially within the context of the campaigning, the manifesto, and the anti-corruption drive that this particular government had. Having said that, I think that in comparison with the expectation of citizens, and I would like to say I'm speaking for the citizens now, there is a big gap in what we would have expected to have happened. And I think that government, your question on how deliberate, I think it's a very crucial question. How much more deliberate or targeted can we be moving ahead to look at the fundamentals? I mean, GII may have looked at some of the data and come up with its suggestions, but that data can be further mined so that we understand precisely what else we should be doing in line with the NACAP to make quantum leaps. I would like to say that at the end, the next time we have a CPI, 51. I mean, and I think that this government can do it.
In other words, government should set itself targets.
Yes. We want to see targets. We want to see an engagement with civil society like GII and look again at that data and say, this is what we're going to do within this time frame by these sectors to get there. That will make all of us proud.
And a very important point before I bring Kojo on this. You say this, also bearing in mind what it means for our general well-being, our economic performance,
Absolutely.
Because if you look at all the other African countries who are doing fantastically, isolated as the examples of
Rwanda.
best, all of them are those countries who on the continent are doing economically fantastically well. And everybody's citing them as examples of how you can fix an economy.
Absolutely.
Rwanda, Botswana, Seychelles, Mauritius, Namibia. These are countries that we mention their names with pride.
Absolutely.
Even locally, we are citing them as examples of how well Ghana could do. And all of these countries are scoring 60, 50, 66 on the. So you're saying to me that you could see a direct correlation between how well you perform in the CPI
and the economy.
Kojo, what's your reaction to that?
I think we will be foolish to argue with that analysis because it is a fact. We believe in opposition. We can't today say we don't believe it anymore. But what you can do as an administration is to introduce measures that help to curb the practices of corruption and close down the space that people have to perpetrate corrupt acts. But while you are doing it, you also have to realize that on the other hand, there's pushback from the very citizens and the very people that you are working with. And let me say, for example, take the court paperless process that we've been trying to do and the automation exercise at the courts. And look at the level of objection or obstruction that government faces on a daily basis, even as you try to introduce things like the cargo tracking nodes, and even if you've taken away benchmarking and you're saying people to go through a certain paperless system, you've had to report on it over and over and over again. So you have to fight these battles, succeed, go through the lag period for people to begin to actually now come to the point that, well, we see that these things now make it more efficient and makes things less corrupt if you're doing business at the ports. This is just one example in one of the many areas where we are trying to introduce reforms that help us curb corruption. In that context, you may not therefore see 100 basis points shift in a year or so. And I'm sorry to disappoint my brother, in the studio. You may not see that very significant shift in a year of about 100 basis points or 10 points on this scale because of the construct in which these reforms have to occur. But I also share the view that it is the consistency with which we do this, not backing down regardless of the politics associated with it, but our ability to keep at it, that ensures that at the end of the day, it works, and most importantly, the people who do business acknowledge that things are getting.
So finally, will government set targets for itself now, looking at next year's CPI and say we want to reach the 50 mark?
I started off by saying that this is feedback.
Yeah.
And I honestly don't think it's healthy for any country to that our agenda is to score X on this platform. What governments should do should say, what is the substantive thing we need to do to fight corruption? What are the substantive measures we need to put in place? Digitizing the economy, making some of these transactions paperless, improving public accountability systems. Those are the things that government sets as targets and will continue to focus on and hopefully ace. And when we do, we expect that it will translate into an improved scoring on some of these skills as you have. But like we've consistently said, it is feedback, we take it to good faith, and we'll work with it.
I'm grateful that you joined us. That's Upon Nkrumah. He is the Information Minister speaking to us there. Your reaction, Linda?
He said a lot, and obviously, as Adam, even though I was originally supporting Adam for us to be demanding maybe a 9 points the next time we are getting here, I think it will be very difficult. It will mean Ghana will have to perform at least on all the 9, perform very well on all the 9 subjects.
So a realistic improvement will be what?
Oh, we should be looking at, we were able to drop by 4 points and by 3 points in the previous year. So increasing it by 3 points or 4 points.
Okay. So you think 45 is doable?
Yep.
45 is doable.
It's doable.
Okay.
And we are likely, if anything, we should be able to do that in 2019 if, as the minister said, the interventions that they've put in place, they continue to work hard to ensure they are working. Because realize that the CPI is looking at administrative corruption and political corruption.
Yeah.
In 2020, we are likely to get it to the elections, and issues about vote buying and all those things will come up.
Yeah.
And if care is not taken, we might not be able to make any significant improvement in 2020.
Okay.
So our best bet now is to try and shoot up.
This year?
Yeah, this year.
And the question that I really wish that we could, in fact, bring him back and put to him, just escape him, because it's part of the key things that the report mentions is lack of prosecution. Yeah. And I know I'm raising that because before 2017 in elections, we had high expectations that Nanado is going to wield the cane and crack the whip. In fact, he himself one time at the press was asked the question that people thought he's a very hard, stern man. He said, I'm a very likable person. But that was the reputation with which he came into power. Because of what he's done when he was Attorney General. Prosecuting people who were corrupt, jailing a lot of them. But you say, and it was part of the press statement, that the lack of that
might have contributed significantly to why we did not even score above 41. Because we have had numerous allegations of corruption. Now remember, before we went on break last year, we put the issues out there. So many matters have still not been resolved. They have not been fully addressed. And so GI was of the opinion that if government had taken steps, government and state institutions responsible for investigating, prosecuting and sanctioning the corrupt had made some good gains or been able to address these matters and completed them, I'm sure we could have actually gotten a point or two. Because questions are asked about judiciary and how corruption matters are all addressed and resolved. So government accountability, you demand for accountability, you demand for prosecution. The demand is being made, all right, but what is the end result of all the shoutings that we did? So if we were able to make some great move in that direction, so I'm sure we would have scored more. And even if the OSP had been able to start work and done so much during that period, I'm sure it would have actually influenced.
But that is such an important point, and I guess the president made the OSP a key plank of his anti-corruption fight. The OSP has been established. You are on the board. Mr. Senanu, how important is that point of the lack of prosecutions playing a role in a underperformance on the CPI?
It's absolutely important, because the perception amongst the citizen and everyone is that, look, during the political campaign period, there was all this discussion of this one has chopped money, that institution, and so on and so forth. And there's a sense that to sanitize the space, these people need to be held accountable. The prosecution happened, people are sanctioned, and we can clearly see that we have set a precedent. It makes it more risky for anybody to think that I can continue this way with impunity. That hasn't happened. And for all of us, I mean, you know, the first year, we kept saying that, okay, give them time to settle, give them time to settle. But once we went past 2017, everybody started saying, now what is happening? We are not hearing about any cases. Nobody is being held. Is it that they've rubbed my back, you rub my back, I rub your back kind of business going on here? So it's an absolutely important issue that GI has raised, that prosecutions must happen. The response to these allegations must be so robust. And we don't want the president saying that I've done an investigation and my guys are clean. Allow other third-party institutions to do that. Otherwise, it's as if there's a kind of conflict of interest there, and it makes all of us uncomfortable. So it's a very important point.
Okay. Thankfully, Mr. Ponkrumah is with us, and so let's put that all-important question to him. Mr. Ponkrumah, the part of the CPI press statement today mentions that the lack of prosecutions of cases of corruption has contributed to our inability to perform better than we actually did. Mr. Senanu, for example, mentions that, I mean, the president came to power with a reputation of being the man who cracks the whip. And yet, he says, and many have suggested also, that we haven't seen any prosecution start yet, either for former appointees or, I mean, okay, we've seen a few of them, but in terms of following that through and getting convictions, we are yet to see as much as we are promised. When will the prosecution start, and what's your reaction to that comment?
So, Evan, first of all, when somebody says that prosecuting cases of corruption is not forthcoming, and that's why perhaps we're not scoring as well. My question back to that person, what is the definition of cases of corruption? Is it the allegations we hear on the radio, or the ones that have been investigated and the investigative bodies have said that they have a docket that they believe can show that this person has been involved in an act of corruption? I think it's the latter. And if it is the latter, then today, if you go to our courts, there are at least 3 cases where the administration believes that corruption has been occasioned, and these persons are before the courts. The NCA matter is in the courts. The Senate matter is in the courts. The Cocoa Board matter is in the courts. These are instances where proper investigations have been done. There are dockets that you prefer, and they are before the courts. And it's not as though the state has stopped prosecuting. These cases have not been struck out for what the prosecution. It is going through the process. So, with great respect, I will depart from my colleagues when it comes to this sort of analysis, that a prosecution of cases of corruption is not happening. I think one of the challenges we're having is that we are equating allegations of corruption to cases of corruption. And with great respect, if tomorrow I said that Joe Evans Mensah were corrupt and threw some allegations at you, and I said multimedia is not taking action on the cases of corruption before, that would be very unfair to you, because all I've done is to throw an allegation at you. The president has said that when you make allegations of corruption against persons in this administration, one, he would ensure that it's investigated. The arm of the agency that is, or the arm of the state that is available to him, he has had occasion to subject even ministers, deputy chiefs of staff, to CID investigations, and they could not find this so-called corruption. Now, if anybody is of the view that that investigation was not done well enough, and therefore maybe even there was a cover-up, there are other organizations, independent organizations, that can conduct similar investigations. SHRAJ exists. The Office of the Special Prosecutor today exists. So if in the absence of the president's investigation, You haven't gone to any of these organizations to do, a parallel investigation to say that while the earlier investigation said there was no incident of corruption, they have found incidents of corruption, and therefore they are bailing it to the Attorney General to prosecute. Or even if you doubt the Attorney General's ability to prosecute, the Office of the Special Prosecutor to prosecute. And then you say that the government is not acting on cases of corruption. I don't think that, honestly, we are being fair even to ourselves as a people. Our commitment is to ensure that the loopholes for people to prevent corruption are closed. And where we find evidence, action will be taken. Even if you don't believe the actions that we are undertaking, you have recourse to other organizations. I think that we should begin to challenge some of these organizations. That instead of just raising it and saying, I've raised an allegation, you haven't acted or prosecuted persons for it. We should also encourage them that even if you don't believe what the government is doing, try the special prosecutor, try. And we've had instances in this country where people have tried, and Shraj has actually gone ahead to make a determination against sitting government officials. I haven't seen that in the last 2 years here. And I think that that's what we encourage people to do if they believe that some of the allegations really are substantive incidents of corruption.
Mr. Ponkruma is the information minister. Final thoughts to you on that, because he's shipped to sing special prosecutor. 30 seconds because we need to wrap up.
Okay, so then I think the minister spoke as a politician, but in the past, all these cases were very relevant to a government that was looking for a party, was looking for an opportunity to come to government. But for us, we still maintain that issues of corruption have not been, we've not been able to deal with them as the citizens expect the government to be able
but what is the OSP doing? What is Shraj doing? He says if you are not happy with what government has done with the BNI and etc., then let the independent ones do theirs. Isn't that a fair point, Mr. Senanu?
I don't think so. I think government is still responsible because of the promises they made to us in their manifesto.
Yeah, but there are state institutions that are independent. They should do the job.
They can also do their work, but government...
So why we don't hold the OSP and Shraj accountable?
We will hold them responsible. We hold government ultimately responsible for
everything that happens.
I like to encourage them to set targets.
Okay, they should set a target.
They should set targets.
Okay, I'm grateful. I'm just run out of time. But I'm grateful that you joined us. Linda, I'm grateful as well. And Senanu, I'm grateful that you joined us. So this has been PM Express. We'll come your way again tomorrow with a very explosive interview with, guess who? The former Deputy General Secretary of the NDC, Kokwendo. Since he lost that position, he hasn't spoken. There's a lot we're going to be talking about tomorrow. Join us then.